So let's go to the eighth lesson, eighth story, Elijah and the angel. Who chose to name the topic, the lesson like that, by the way? Like I struggled with the name a
I
little
think
bit.
you came up with the angel.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
Elijah and the angel, like, wasn't angel in this story?
Yeah.
Like,
It's a little bit of an unlikely story because when we think about Elijah, we almost think about just this man of supernatural ability that is calling fire down from heaven and
Right.
Taking on the entire 850 false prophets and outrunning the chariot of Ahab. And yet, one of the most remarkable chapters in the Bible is that next chapter, I think, chapter 19 of 1 Kings, where all of a sudden this man of tremendous power in the Spirit of God,
Right.
all of a sudden it just like he swings to a really scary place. I think this is a lesson especially for our leaders, our ministers, but also for just any ministry worker who is up to here in giving and giving and doing and doing. I think this is a really important lesson for them. Burnout, coming to basically the end of yourself, this exhaustion, it is a crisis of faith. And it's not necessarily, it can be, but it's not necessarily a crisis of faith in God. In the case of Elijah, what's interesting is he seems to be having a crisis of faith in himself. It's he once he runs from Jezebel's threat. Jezebel looks at everything he did just the day before and says, "You're dead meat." and it says he ran. And here's a guy who had just faced hundreds, him against the world, so to speak. And yet now, at the threat of the queen, he's running for his life. And you see, by the time he gets out into the wilderness, he's at the end of his rope, and he just says, "Just kill me, God. I'm no better than my fathers." And you can see he's upset with himself. He's upset with I think his loss of energy, his loss of faith. And so this is a really interesting story to sort of explore the limits of our human ability and where the power of God really comes in. And in the end, his rescue from exhaustion, his rescue from self-doubt is answered by God's fresh commissioning, a new call. And
Is that where the angel comes in?
the angel, you say, he's ready to die, and he goes to sleep, and the angel wakes him up and feeds him, gives him water and drink, and then he puts him back to sleep, lets him rest a little bit more, and then the angel feeds him again. It says on the strength of that, he went into the presence of God and didn't eat for 40 days and 40 nights. And it really, again, it's reinforcing who has the strength here. Is it Elijah that has the strength, or is the strength something that comes from God by way of gift? And I think that's the bigger part of this story, that all of our ministries come down to God working through us by gift, and really not about our personal strength, but really about God working through us by His strength.
And as you enter this, Jody, add also, how do we think that ministers are restored today? Like, if we hit that point of being burnt out, reach the end of ourselves, have less faith in ourselves, how are we restored? An angel was involved here to restore, like with a fresh revelation of God and a time off almost. So add to what Jason said, but also add that flavor for today of how ministers are restored today.
Sure. So, I think that when we get into trouble, when especially when you're in a ministry of where your role is to be giving, and you're continually giving and giving, and you get under more and more pressure, then I think our tendency is to try to do it in our strength, and to say, well, I just got to get this done, and the more you do that, you continue in trying to do it in your strength, you're going to reach the end of your grace. It's kind of like, I kind of think of it like if you go to a gas station and you get to the cashier and you see that little tray of pennies, and you put a penny in, you take a penny out. I think that's kind of like our grace, that when people, we're willing to give people, some pennies of our grace out of there, and then when some people put some pennies back in for us, and we kind of operate out of that little tray of pennies. But if we're in a position where we're having to give out more than people are putting back in, then we say, hey, I'm out, and there is no more grace to give.
Got nothing left to give.
Right, and that's because we're trying to do it in our strength, rather than recognizing that look, we're not the source of grace. We're not the source of love. We're just a conduit. We need to go to the source and let God replenish, those reserves, and through God, then we can continue to give. And so I think those things are for our pastors and
anyone ministering.
Yeah, anyone ministering is that we're grateful for the work that they're doing, and we want to see them, protect themselves from that kind of burnout. And it's just our human tendency for all of us is to rely on our own strength, especially when times get hard and it's, we get more and more on our plate to do. And we've got to remember that's not the time to be cutting out, our time with God and saying, I just got to get this done, and then I'll go back to, my worship, or go back to my Bible reading and prayer and things like that. It's like, that's when you need it the most, because you got to be close to God, because He's the source. You're going to run out of grace, and that's the best thing for the pastors is just that reminder. They know that already, but it's just that we all need that reminder that we're not the source of grace. He is.
You asked about practical things that we can do. How does God restore us now? I haven't been fed by an angel lately, or have I? Or have I? Yesterday I was fed by a company of angels visiting the Lanham Church. I went home feeling so nourished and revived, because these strangers were angels of mercy, and they just filled me up with their generosity and their love and their tenderness towards us. I think we need to remember that God does send angels unawares, and you might be surprised where they come from. And there are so many opportunities for us to step back and to find strength in those quiet times, those alone times, even in those times that are really fraught with depression, fraught with extreme depression. I mean, Elijah's moved from this mountaintop experience down to almost a suicidal, just take my life, I'm done, I'm out, I can't do anymore. And yet, even in that lowest place, which I think many people can identify with, there's God's presence. The angel of the Lord is also the Spirit of the Lord. We have the Spirit in us, and it wants to refresh us. The people of God want to refresh us. I think one important area not to overlook, and for the class to really explore together, is part of Elijah's situation here is that he's actually laboring under a misconception. We see this in both chapter 18 and 19. Elijah, as great as he is, as full of the Spirit, it's undeniable what God is doing through him. At the same time, we see indications in Mount Carmel, and also later on, I think, is it Mount Horeb, what he goes to secondly to meet with God. In both cases, Elijah says, I'm all that's left. There's no one else. It's me against everything. And I think pastors and ministers, we have to be really careful not to think, if it wasn't for me, there would be no one can do this but me. And so it's important that, and I believe it's Obadiah on the front end, and then Yahweh himself, God on himself on the other end, says, I got all kinds of people. You're not alone. It's not just your job. This is my job. You are my minister. Now I'm giving you a new commission. It's beautiful how tenderly God reveals to himself. It's almost secondarily. Hey, don't worry about it. I have 7,000 who haven't bent the knee. You're not by yourself. Sometimes we do feel utterly alone. And this goes back to lesson 1, and loneliness, that is alienation pops up often. And
that's what you're seeing with the superintendents that we're working with. Is that the superintendents have been used to basically focusing just on their districts, but they would have many of the same problems in their district as in another district, And so now they've become to work more together as a team and to solve problems together, and to see, you know, that value in look, I've got 6 other guys that are doing the exact same job as me, and they've got the answers that I need if I just learn to rely on them, and they learn to restore each other, and as Jason was saying, was these angels in waiting just to help each other. And that's the same thing that we're hoping that the pastors can do too. It's recognizing that each of the pastors have their own individual roles, their own individual ministries in the church that they're going to be leading, but still to rely on each other, to see each other as angels that and being an angel too, of I need the help and the support from my other pastors, but I also need to be there and check on my other pastors and see if they need some of my support.
Right. This is excellent. So, so Elijah is rescued from
Despondency,
Yeah, right.
depression,
and restored to.
a new calling, a new mission.
Right.
What would you
Right.
add to that?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Did I get it?
I think that's great.
And with that, let's go to the next lesson.